So I know we're gonna go here in a second to a couple of questions that I thought I saw a question come in. But one of the things before we go to that question is we have people always say, I don't see race. I don't see color. They're kind of colorblind to this, and they teach their children to be colorblind. Is colorblindness something that we should be striving for?
No. The short answer to that is no. So this came from, the word colorblindness came from Dr. Martin Luther King's speech. That we need to focus on content of character and not color of skin. And so people really took that and ran with it in the sense of, oh, then we shouldn't be talking about this and we shouldn't be thinking about it and let's not put it in our vernacular. And so all of a sudden, those were, back in the day. Now we don't have a good language to speak and we're afraid to speak and we're all, don't mention somebody's race. And that literally came from that idea. And it works actually really well for white folks to believe in colorblindness, because if I don't have to see your race, then I don't have to see mine. And I don't have to see the fact that my whiteness may actually, be impacting my life and that it has anything to do, because we're taught we live in a meritocracy. And the reality is we're not living on a level playing field, right? The historic, again, going back to our history and thinking about the historical legacy of institutionalized and systemic racism, sexism, heterosexism, ageism, ableism. We're not on a level playing field. And so when we think about colorblindness, it's when I say, if I as a white person were to say to you, Cody, as a person of color, saying, I don't even see your color, we're all the same. Basically it's saying, I don't see you. I don't honor the experiences that you've had in your life. I don't, I'm completely ignoring who you are and, maybe some of the struggles you've had, maybe some of the beautiful pieces of your life that you've had based on your race. And it, again, it's a safety mechanism for white folks to be able to say, I don't want to see my own privilege. I don't want to see the way my, my whiteness, has influenced me and has helped me to get where I am. I always use this because I will get pushback on that, from white folks who will say, I don't feel like I have any privilege. I grew up, I grew up poor, maybe I'm still poor, whatever. I don't feel like I have any privilege. And what I say is and I always try to come from my own experience, that for me, I know that I've worked really, really hard in my life. I came from, I would say, humble beginnings, let's say financially. And along the way, I did work extremely hard all through the graduate school, PhD, doctorate, blah, 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 and to get tenure and all of the things that I've done in my life. And yet I know that my colleagues of color not only did what I did, but they had to work 10 times harder. And, there is a difference. We're not on a level playing field. If we were truly on a level playing field, then colorblindness would mean we love and appreciate and embrace and welcome everyone, right? That means we would have gotten there. We are not there yet, and we can't pretend to be.
Yeah, no, and you brought up white privilege. When I say that, when I have said that term before to people, they've taken offense because they didn't understand what white privilege actually meant. I have lived a life where I've had some privileges, but I am not privileged because I can't hide who I am. So can you talk a little bit about what is the unintentional perpetuation of exclusion that might come from white privilege?
And so I would call this, I would, we're talking about racism today, but I just want to, in my intersectional lens and hat on and all of that, I want to also say that we could be talking about gender privilege, so male privilege. We could be talking about sexuality privilege, so that would be heterosexual privilege. And how does that play out? So just knowing that what I'm about to say actually relates to all these other social identities as well. When we think about privilege and how it operates in our society, we think about the fact that, you gave a great example just a minute ago, that you have some privilege, but you are not, from a racial standpoint, you don't identify as somebody who is racially privileged, which from our society and the way, you know, if you look at, even looking at the idea of who gets to run towards the police today, right? Now, this is a hot topic right now. Who gets to run towards the police for safety, and who has to run away from police for safety? We know that there is a racial difference here. Like, there is no question about it. And so so white privilege in my mind is, you know, that white skin privilege means that I am, it's so, you know, for the most part, I can trust that if I go in, you know, go to run to the police, they'll believe what I have to say, even, right?
Yeah.
That you know, it's less likely that I'm going to not only get beaten up or arrested, but killed. You know, things like that. I mean, that really distinguishes. And for those who are like, I don't believe that there really is privilege and all of that, I'm like, well, here's a really good example that is right in front of our eyes throughout the country right now.
Yeah, no, you know, it brings me, it just kind of throws me back to my days when I was growing up, right? I'll share some. I really haven't talked much about this with anybody outside of my small circle of trusted friends that I grew up with. And one of the things that when I was a kid, I was really sensitive. I got frustrated and cried about things when people hurt my feeling. But my mom, she taught me that, look, you've got to get thicker skin because you'll be crying your whole life if you don't. The other thing that my family taught is you need to learn to play the game and work in the system. And so I did that. And part of what happened when I was a kid is I'd been called the N-word. I've been called the N-word as an adult. I'd been teased about my hair and what my hair was like. I was teased about my lips and how they were shaped and the size of them. I'd been harassed by the police with my friends who were also Black and my brothers, excluded from parties, right? These are things that I knew that I was Black when I couldn't, there's no way to hide it, right? I wasn't allowed at times to go to a sleepover at my white friends' houses because their parents didn't want N-word per kid coming over to their house, right? I've been threatened by the fathers of my white girlfriends growing up in the town that I grew up in. And then, I joined the Navy. And when I joined the Navy, I was thinking I'm away from all that. But as an officer in the Navy, I had seen racist comments in a book that's called a pass down log. When you come on to watch on the bridge, there's a book there and there's racist drawings in there, right? Kind of targeted. And it was obviously that was for me. And I've never complained about it, right? I've always thought, you know what, got to work through the system, got to make these things happen, even to the point of enduring racist jokes that I knew were racist. And I think I'm not speaking for all Blacks and African Americans, but a lot of people allow that to happen, right? And you just can't get away from that. And so it's one of those things where I don't have the privilege of not showing that I am Black and I am African American. I can't hide that. And so there are going to be all those things that come up, those prejudice, those bigotry, and the racism because of the system and the power. Those organizations that I was in had power and they had control over the finances and my livelihood. And so you just kind of endured and don't make a big stink and you work in the system. And so I say all that because I wanted to share that personal context. But knowing that and knowing that there are people like me out there, how do you take someone who is very uncomfortable with what I just talked about and has never experienced that and get them to really kind of start that discussion around racism and moving forward in this effort?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your personal experience. Because I know that there are others out there who may not know, you know, they may not understand, or they may not see it, and or maybe they didn't want to see, and so they didn't hear before. And so I appreciate your sharing your experience, because I do believe connecting in that way is so critically important for people, and especially for leaders, to understand why it's so important we have these conversations in the workplace. That a lot of people will say, well, that's for, you know, that's not for the workplace, that's not the place for this. But when you think about the fact that you, as you know, your own experiences are one example, and you know, you're coming to work every day with that whole, you know, body of experience behind you, you know, from your own history, and that, you know, we could say that about so many folks, especially in our workplaces. And to assume that people are coming in and just giving it their all and showing up and doing what they're doing. Not that you haven't and that you know, you don't, but the struggle or the challenge, what you have to overcome, the thicker skin, all of that, that most white folks, I'm not going to say all white folks, but most white folks don't have to think about. They can just come in and give it their all and do their thing, and they think it's normal. And they think that, oh, well, of course, everybody's included. Isn't everybody's experience the same as mine? And so we bring in the idea of perspective taking, and we can only get to perspective taking, honestly, if we share our stories with each other. And yeah, I want to come back to your question, though, specifically. How do we have those conversations, knowing that, you know, with the caveat that we've already talked about, that we're going to make mistakes, and that it's important that we do have the conversations, and all of these pieces where you feel like, okay, I need to do it. How do I do it? How do I engage? And I think that creating forums, creating ways for people to navigate these conversations, I think is helpful. Bringing, I mean, I've done this work with lots of organizations where I've come in to facilitate conversations, even if it's on screen in Zoom, where folks are sharing stories, and at the same time, you know, the other people who are hearing, who are listening, are holding space, you know, very gently receiving, even if they're like, oh my gosh, that couldn't possibly have happened, like, because that's what we're taught. We're taught this can't possibly be the truth in our country, like that there's some percentage of our population, and, you know, that are human beings that are having really challenging experiences. We're like, no, that can't be. There must be some other reason. There must be something else going on. And the reality is, we need to be able to hear, to really listen to those stories and share our own as well. I mean, I'm open about the fact that I grew up in an abusive household. I'm the survivor of sexual assault, sexual abuse in my childhood. I've really, you know, I've struggled with PTSD and all kinds of things along the way to overcome some of that so that I could heal. And I just feel like there's a lot of healing that needs to take place in our society. And we're kind of, you know, a lot of people are jumping to, well, let's just have a conversation. And I'm like, yes, and we also need to do our own healing, our own growth, learn about our own biases, and what we don't know, which takes some training, and then come together and have some really authentic relationship building, right? Trust building. We're so lacking on trust right now in our society, in my opinion, and that's really where we need to go.